beautiful Selfish Babes. It is your girl, Olenike OC here, bringing you another Selfish Babes Selfish Talk podcast with the beautiful Dia Sims. Dia Sims, say hello to our Selfish Babes.
Hello.
And as you guys know, through my introduction, I have already introduced this lovely woman. And you know, when I bring on a Selfish Babe, I always have to ask them, what is one traumatic event or experience that they have been through? And the reason why I especially want to ask Dia is because, looking from the outside in, and it's fact, you are very successful. You worked with PD as well, being the president of Comb Industries. And so as a Selfish Babe looking in, I can be like, wow, she's very successful. She's on her boss shit. Now she's going into a whole new industry, cannabis, and taking that over. So my thing is, wow, being a Selfish Babe, I can be like, wow, she has it all right. And that can very well be the case. But I also want to know some of the things that you have been through, or what is something that comes directly from your past or to the top of your mind when you think of traumatic or past obstacle you may have been through.
No, of course. First, thanks for having me on, and just hello to everybody. I think it's worth saying, and forgive me if this is super corny and Pollyanna-ish, but it's always important for us to think about, like, for me, really success just comes down to, are you happy more days than not? Everything else beyond that is just added value. So I feel very blessed that I have been very successful almost all of my life, just because most of the time I have people who love me and I love people, and that really is the sum value of life. So any dollar I made on top of that is just whipped cream on a Sunday. In terms of a traumatic event, I think I've never shared this publicly before, but when I have been married for maybe 2 years, I got pregnant and we were really excited, but it was still pretty early, like in the first trimester. So we hadn't told anybody. Yeah. And we lived in Atlanta at the time. We went to New York for a wedding. And that night at the wedding, we told a couple who still are very, very close friends of ours. And the next morning, my husband left for his flight back to Atlanta. I was still working with Puff in New York. And he's like, fine, everything's fine. He's like at the airport on the plane. And then I started to have a miscarriage.
Wow.
And so I'm by myself in a hotel. I go straight to the hospital. I call my dad. And a close friend head to the hospital. But, of course, at this point, I don't know what's going on. I just know it's a problem and I'm bleeding. I get to the hospital and they tell me that I miscarried. And it was really difficult because my husband's in the air. I can't reach him, blah, blah, blah. My friends come and meet me and I go home. And I think retrospectively, I was talking to a good friend about this, that I don't know that I probably really grieved at that time because, I took the day and I went back to work the next day. And because there is not really a clear forum. There is no out of work day. Nobody puts that out of office. I'm not home. I'm not here today because I had a miscarriage, right? There isn't a place to talk about it. And I think things are changing a little bit, but this was not that long. Maybe like 10 or 7. I guess it probably was like over a decade ago. And I don't think I really grieved until I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 7, like towards the end of that trimester. And I was like, God, this was a real child. You know what I mean? Like, this was a real death that I never really dealt with. So I think it's important because I love, I'm 44 and in my generation, we didn't really, we didn't really take the time. I was just like, well, back to work, can't stop, won't stop. Like, keep moving.
Yeah.
And this is part of the reason why I was really excited to do this was I love your platform in that we really can't be whole if we're not taking the time to nurture ourselves first. Like, that shit is not a game because you just can only have a certain amount of capacity, and trying to smush down these little issues, they're just going to pop up someplace else. Yeah. So for me, that was hard, and I don't think I really, really dealt with it till many years later.
So when you say many years later and dealt with it, how did you do so?
So, even just talking about it, even just talking to my husband, talking to some of my girlfriends who had been through something similar, being able to cry. I was very, it happened. It was terrible. I cried. We have a wonderful parents. My dad was there, like the Black Cure left me with ginger ale and crackers. And then, the next morning I was just back at it. That was kind of like, you get this amount of time to grieve it, or to, you got to move forward. Yeah. So, I think even I had not really perceived it fully as like a death when it happened. So I felt like many years later, when I was able to say, God, this was a loss of a child, you know what I mean? This was a real thing, that that helped me kind of go through it in a different way.
Interesting. Yeah, I think miscarriage is definitely difficult. That is the loss of a child. And, you know, I just loved your example of how I feel like it is sometimes with women. It's like, okay, this happened. Okay, you know, got a day off. Okay, back at it on the go, like you said, because usually that's the way that we've been taught, or that's just the way we've seen maybe other people process things, or we don't even know that they're going through something because they've never talked about it. And so because they've talked about it, when it does happen to maybe one of us, then it's like, well, we don't know. We're just not going to talk about it. And then you mentioned, I'm taking off because I got a miscarriage. I have a question for you. Now, when you decided to take off, right? Did you ever think to say, I'm taking off because I had a miscarriage, or did you want to keep that private? Because it was, you know, a private.
No, it did not even occur to me. It did not even occur to me. And I am, you know, it was obvious. I was, you know, but still like very hardworking, very 24 hours at the office all the time. So even just so this happens in the morning, I still, after I leave the hospital, go into the office, like to get my laptop and stuff so I can work remotely. And some of my friends a couple of friends came with me. And I think my team, they could see like I was not all the way myself. So it wasn't nothing to be said, but I don't feel well. And I think people were concerned. Oh, my earring dropped. You know, even my earrings worried. No. But it wasn't even, to be honest, I'm saying I took off. I really just was like, I'm going to be at home working. You know what I mean? Like took a little bit of rest and work from home and was just completely back in the office the next day. And it was just, you know, took my Motrin and kept moving. And I just think that was an expectation I put on myself. I don't know that anybody wouldn't have been understanding about it, but it had never, to your point, it's hard to be what you've never seen. Yeah. And I definitely didn't feel free to be clear about like, I'm taking some time, I'm grieving this the way I would have if a family member passed away.
Yeah, because usually when a family member passes away, we're able, oh, so-and-so passed away, this is what I'm going through. We're more willing to actually express that.
Absolutely.
Wow. I had a podcast a few months back, and that podcast is completely different, but that podcast I was talking about abortion. And in that podcast, I talked about abortion, and I talked about, we had many different women on that have had different abortions for different reasons. And at one point, one woman, she talked about angel babies. And basically, her daughter, she has a daughter now, but her daughter, when she was so young, she would see her mom's passed on maybe son or daughter that was passed on, and she was younger.
Oh, wow.
See that, because some kids are very spiritually gifted. Some people are very spiritually gifted where they can see spirit. And so they were messing with her. So she had gotten a reading done, and the reading had told her that, oh, these are angel babies. They just want to be acknowledged. That's it. They understand that they have passed on, but they just want to be acknowledged. So now after she started acknowledging those angel babies, they stopped messing with her daughter. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I even had a woman that talked about a miscarriage, but it's because it's like, as you said, you went through that process and you realized that was a loss of a child. But before, that wasn't your initial reaction, right? But now,
right.
You know, you're understanding, well, that was a loss of my child. And so the grieving process or the letting go process. And then even for me, the acknowledgement process. And so during that time, we had talked about, because I talked about my own personal abortion and how, for me, I wrote a letter to my would be then child. I wrote a letter, you know, saying why I did what I did and letting that go. And I will say that through different readings that was accepted, because I'm a very spiritual woman, as I talk about in my other podcasts, but that was like my son, because it would have been a son, my son understood why I made that decision. And so what listening, and even for you, Dia, if you do want to go back there, I would highly suggest writing a letter to your child, just, you know, saying how you were feeling, you know, and just expressing yourself. And then I also mentioned lighting a white or a blue candle just so that spirit can elevate. And also for the acknowledgement piece. The acknowledgement piece is like, wow, you know, you were going to be here on earth and you didn't make it onto this plane, but I still acknowledge you as my child, still very much so love you. Watch over us and the family, because now, as people say, you are now an angel baby. So for the selfish babe listening, as well as for you, Dia, that is just some suggestions that I would suggest. But it's like, you know, we have this physical realm here, but then we do have, from my personal belief, we have the spirit realm, we have the unseen. And a lot of times, before we get into this physical realm, we have the unseen realm, right? And so your baby is definitely you. And sometimes I think that acknowledgement is just nice to have. And I just want to say that for the selfish babe listening, because I know there's many women that have gone through miscarriages and it's not talked about, it's not really dealt with. And maybe we do talk to our close friends. And I will affirm that one day in the workplace that we can be a lot more open about it, because I will I think that in a workplace, and I can't speak from personal experience, this is just from me observing society. I think that in a workplace, at least in America, it's like, I feel like sometimes a woman cannot be whole. And when I say that, I mean, it's like, yes, we want to be, we are also as good as men as well. But then we have another counterpart where we have our vaginas and we have our wombs and we can create babies. And, we have that mothering aspect of us. But sometimes when it comes to being in the workforce, at least in America, it's like a woman gets pregnant, she has her baby, boom, she's back in work, and that's it. Like she on the go. And that was it. And so it's just like the acknowledgement of that part of a woman, which is like, you have this womb, you have this vagina, you may want to conceive a child one day, and whether it's a miscarriage or whether it's full conception and here into this earthly realm, then it's like that, just that acknowledgement, more compassion for that. I don't think that there's a lot of in the workplace for that. And so even you talking about one day, a woman just being as bold to say, hey guys, like maybe you don't want to talk about it right when it happens, or maybe a month or two later, it's like, hey guys, this is what I went through. I went through a miscarriage, and I just wanted to share this because I know that it's not talked about often. But I feel like just even sharing that is the acknowledgement and a compassion of the divine feminine, right? Because we have both, divine feminine and divine masculine, but we have to understand that with a woman's body, we can conceive and we can bring earth into this realm. And so sometimes it's just like, just having that conversation, I feel like has a lot more compassion that I feel like is not really talked about in the workplace. But yeah.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. I mean, they often say, like, for women, you have to, you have to work like you don't, basically have to work like you don't have a home. And at home, you have to kind of behave as if you don't have a job, right? So, I mean, in terms of like the expectation. So it is, we're in a very, it's a wonderful time to see a transition for women, but it is untested and it's unproven. And I think we are the test generation of the amount of things we're trying to bear at once and stepping into what has always been there, but speaking the appropriate level of consideration and acknowledgement and compensation for it, frankly, right? But then, the truth is, we still are carrying centuries of expectations of what a woman is supposed to be in a household, who a woman is supposed to be in a relationship with. And it's unprecedented. It's as unprecedented as the pandemic we're in right now. Yeah. So I think we're all figuring it out hour by hour is why these type of forms are critical.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you had mentioned something about you got your laptop, you went back home because you wanted to, work remote. And so even during this time with a lot of people working remote, I will say, like, something that I always say that I think would be helpful, that people do have more time home and they may be also working remote and doing work. But I will say, for especially the women out there, that I would definitely take this time to do some soul searching, some uncovering, some inner child healing, some things that you have probably tucked behind you because you were like, okay, get up and go. And I think this is a wonderful time for women to really, and men, but for women especially, to just work on themselves. And so if you are the selfish babe out there who is working remotely, do your grind, do your work, but definitely take this time to do some self-reflection, because there's some stuff that you could be holding on to and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to let it go. We want to move forward.
Let it go. Yeah.
Happy and thrive, because like you mentioned, you talked about success in the beginning, but being happy, being able to be happy. And I think that sometimes some women is just, we're on a go. And it's just like, we don't even reflect on, are we really happy with our lives?
Yeah. That's all it is. I mean, that's the whole game one. And I think in the pursuit of everything else is fool's gold, really.
Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in Queens, New York, mostly. I was born in California. I lived in Germany, but most of my childhood was in New York.
You got this I don't know how to describe it, but when you talk, you got this thing. So I'm like, where's she from? So when you said New York, I was like, it's good though. I'm just like, okay, where's she from? She got a, swag about her.
Yeah, I love New York. Yeah.
Back in the day that you used to be a promoter, and I had seen in some of your past interviews that you would carry a clipboard around with you while you were going doing your job, and that you said that you had did that because you wanted to be taken seriously. Can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's kind of crazy now in retrospect, but in my 20s, me and a couple of my girlfriends we were pretty, big promoters in DC. So we'd have these events that would have 1,000 people every week. And it was just a different time. So at that time, and I don't know how much has changed, but, at that time for women in any kind of nightclub or promoter or lounge or whatever it is, the men were somewhat predatory. So I was so fast with being able to grab somebody's hand before they could smack my behind. I felt like I should have been in the Olympics. You know what I mean? To be able to be and do so I mean, it was just so one of the things I was like, well, I'm taking this very seriously. We were doing this for revenue. We had a great system. Shout out to Mark Barnes in DC who trained us. But in order to get 1,000 people, you had to go out quite a bit and meet new people all the time. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Whenever I have a clipboard, and I really discovered it more by accident, right? So I'm running the line in front, I got my clipboard, and you would see that the young men would treat you very differently when they walk up and see if they're on the list versus seeing you as a potential conquest. And there's, I think there's a lot of, we probably don't have time to even discuss what was going wrong in their point of view, right? To help them be better nourished, to understand how to better interact with women. But that was the culture of the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. So I was like, I'm about to carry this clipboard everywhere. So I would literally just go buy clipboards and give them out to not just my own, but the 20 women that I work with, because it is an immediate different level in the way you were treated. Now, by no stretch of the imagination, should we have to have props to be respected? But it stuck with me, and I used it mentally in any room I was in. It was just my own little trick of okay, what's my clipboard effect when I don't actually have a clipboard, right? So if I'm 20, if I'm 20 something years old in a room where everybody's 30 years older than me talking about a multi-million-dollar decision, what am I doing in the first 2 seconds when I walk in that room? Because most people are making a decision about who you are, why you belong in a room in less than a second, and that's just science, and that's just evolution. How am I carrying myself? How am I, everything, what is down to the way I am walking, the point of my fingers, to your point, the cadence of my voice, the eye contact I'm making, the seat that I'm choosing, that is my kind of metaphorical clipboard effect. Yeah. And I do think it's important, while we're in this, we're in a period of revolution where we would say, we shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to come dressed the way I want, right? If I bring something to the table and that's valid. There's nothing that's not valid about it. But there has to be a balance of what is true and what should be right and what gets things done. They say it takes 100,000 years to change the evolutionary footprint in your brain, right? So we are still operating in many ways. So it's not easy to change the fact that it's in our body, it's in our DNA that you have to make a decision about is somebody a friend or foe. In less than a second, because you're going back to living in the wild. It's actually in our DNA. So try to pretend as if, for good or for bad, if you are a white man, you don't view yourself as a racist, but you don't know a bunch of young Black women. All you have is the experience you've seen on media. Exactly. In some ways, I'm not even saying that. It just is the reality of our lives. Yeah. So when you walk in, all he knows is well, I don't know much. I've seen a couple Housewives episodes. I've seen what I've seen on the news, but I don't know a lot of.
That's not good sources. A lot of that is not valid sources of all Black women.
It's not valid sources, but it is reality, right? So I just think we got to understand, how are you making an impact when you walk in a room, and then ideally, you are the one, person by person, to change the narrative. I can't wait when I have these conversations and they're like, I want to be the one where a CEO of a multinational company who has 30,000 employees is like, our diversity program sucks, Dia, and I just don't know any women like you. And I can't wait to tell them, I'm oh, you think I'm not remotely special? I know tens of thousands of just the badass women. I got to fly lawyers, doctors, judges, artists, anything you want. And let us be the bridge, not just the representative, right? You know what I mean?
Yes. I love that. And I think I did remember reading that in another interview, just like how you were approached, I think, by somebody, and they were talking about diversity to you, and you were
Yes.
willing and able to share. And I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
It just shows the connection. It shows, for me, first of all, it shows that they understand that they want to change, but they want to change from somebody that could be resourceful to them, that's actually helping.
Yes.
Right? And so for me, that's a beautiful thing, because sometimes even like just for you being so ready and willing to want to help, I'm just like, wow, that shows a lot. Because I will say sometimes some people be like, oh, well, I don't know if I can really help you. But you're like, no, if we're really going to see change happen, this is how it starts. You know what I'm trying to say? So the fact that they came up to you and asked, I think is a beautiful thing. And now I know you've done a lot in corporate America, right? And so my thing is, can you explain a little bit what you did? Because I know a lot of your industry is male-dominated. So can you explain a little bit to the Selfish Babes listeners of what you've done in the past?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you a snapshot, because I've worked in a lot of industries. And I think it's important to make the point that at a C-suite level, if you're talking to other CEOs, CMOs, CFOs, there really is no American industry that is not male dominated, right? So in the Fortune 500, there are most recently on an average year, 28 to 30 women CEOs of the top 500 companies. We are 50% of the population. That is just fucking crazy. That doesn't make any sense, which is why and we all should be like, yeah, I know lots of women. Let's get this right, because it actually makes it better for us.
Yeah.
So I started out after graduating from Morgan State in Baltimore. I took a job with the Department of Defense. I think it's important because it raises another opportunity for all of us, in that I was trained in defense negotiations. I went to actually a training curriculum called the Defense Acquisition University, and they also paid for me to get my master's degree. What was a critical piece around this was being trained in how to negotiate contracts. Because one thing that I have found since then, again, that was over 20 years ago, but I use it every day, right? Because you can always use negotiation, is that still to this day, if I have team members, and for the most part, not everybody, but when a woman comes to me to negotiate something versus when a young man does, you can see the difference in the level of audacity. So I may have an extremely talented woman who is phenomenal at her job, just terrific. And almost to a person, I would say 99 out of 100 times, she's actually not asking for what she deserves. And I'll be like, no, do your research, come back, and you need to stand up for it. And it comes down to the fact that negotiation shouldn't be some esoteric skill that I just happen to kind of get because I worked at the Department of Defense. Yeah. We need to be teaching kids this in like first grade. Yeah. So it was a helpful tool to me. And then from there, I went into doing, I went to radio, I did advertising sales, I ran a small ad agency that was focused mostly on spirits, like a marketing company in Maryland. For myself, as an entrepreneur, me and a couple of my friends. Yeah. I worked in pharmaceutical sales as well. And then I moved back to New York from Maryland and got back into radio sales. And that's from there, I inherited all of the music labels as clients. And at the time, Bad Boy Records refused to advertise on this particular station because they were very loyal. Pop is very loyal to Hot 97, which you guys may have heard of, and the first station hip hop out of New York. Yeah. So I was able to break the Bad Boy Records for the first time, and that was kind of my entree into a relationship there. And when Puff was looking to hire a chief of staff, one of his executives called me and was like, would you interview for the job? And she said, and I've said this before, I think she really thought we would get along just because I would send emails out at like 3 a.m. She's like, I think you don't sleep. I know he doesn't sleep. I feel like y'all get along, kind of thing. So we had a short interview, got the job, but he said, look, you have not ever managed really large teams. So I want you to start off as an executive assistant, not the chief of staff role. Which I said, yes. I started off as executive assistant. I was more concerned about, I was like, look, this is what I need to be paid. I don't really care what you call me. You know what I mean? And I felt like this was a chance to go work for somebody who I could learn from. Yeah. And then from there, I went and started off as the executive assistant, and then was promoted and promoted again, and worked with him. I stepped up and asked actually to work with him to help negotiate, going back to my old DOD days, the Ciroc deal. Puff had, as you could imagine, opportunities to work in spirits for over a decade, and he had been unsure about it for a while. Yeah. And when this opportunity came up again, I said, look, I want to be part of the team that negotiates this. And I brought him, so look, I'm trained in negotiations. Before I came here, I was selling $2 million in advertising. I'm happy to keep, booking your jets and running the team, but I think I can also be additive and make things better. He said, okay. His whole thing is like, you can always do more, right? So you keep doing what you're doing and you can do that. So I worked with our CFO. We were a very small team. We negotiated the Ciroc vodka deal with Diageo, which had been doing, they'd had Ciroc for 5 years and the sales had been terrible. And then we worked on it for 9 months, got the deal done. And then I went back to him and said, okay, Puff, you're famous. Your whole lifeblood has been really marketing. And we're at an interesting time in your company's history where we hardly have any marketing staff here. Yeah. So let me relaunch the marketing agency you used to have in the 90s called Blue Flame. Yeah. I said, I'll get it funded. And I want to run it. He said, yep, if you replace yourself as chief of staff, you can go do that. So I went to Diageo. I negotiated money to get it started, picked out a team. And then but I ended up kind of doing both jobs for the first year. And I went back to him. I was like, this is a big opportunity. I said, this is going to be able to make, and actually it's going to be much more. I said, you'll be able to make at least $100 million. We're growing this brand like crazy. Yeah. I said, but I can't, I said, I can do a lot of things, but this one call about that was important, but there'll be one call about managing things with his homes, and the next call about making sure Ciroc was in 500 accounts. I was like, I need to focus so we can over deliver on this opportunity for everybody. Yeah. Or I'm going to need to leave. Yeah. And then that's when he agreed and said, no, just go run the Ciroc business.
Okay. I like that a lot. And even when you talked about, I think it was called defense negotiations, is that what you called it?
Oh, it was called the Defense Acquisition University, and I was trained in contract negotiations.
Contract negotiations. So yes. Even that, right? And even when you talked about walking into rooms and you talked about the 2 seconds that people are going to perceive you and they're going to have a judgment, whether it's in your favor or not in your favor.
Yes.
Like in those scenarios, what were some things, I know you were training this, but what were some things that you do to show your confidence and to be confident in these arenas?
Yes. So to actually be confident, you got to actually do the work, right? Because you can fake it to a certain degree. But I will tell you, back in my Department of Defense days, I was like 21 years old. One of my first contracts was a $120 million contract. To this day, I'm like, I don't know why they would get, you know what I mean? And I was going into rooms with people. I worked with a company that was in, these guys had been in the defense industry for literally 50 years. So I would be in a room and I would be 40 and 50 years younger than the next person. Yeah. They were completely befuddled about why I was there if I was not fetching coffee. Yeah. And now, if I can't, I'm not saying that it turned into a kumbaya fest and that they're now members of the NAACP, but do we think I moved them down the spectrum by knowing my shit? Yeah, 100%. So my only defense at the Department of Defense was I got to actually know the federal acquisition regulations backwards and forwards. And they are just as sexy as they sound, right? Super dry, reading it all night. But what it did was, it's not going to be everything, and it's not our savings grace. But I do think that just being excellent is the foundation of making sure you can walk in with the confidence of you've done everything you can do. And then some of it is just pure techniques. There are, going back to that evolution, I'm a little bit of a science nerd. I forgot her name. There's a woman, Amy Cuddy. If you haven't seen this, Amy, Cuddy, she has a great TED Talk about the position of your body and how this is not just for us, it's for animals, that what it means when you actually open up your chest and what it signals to one another is really critical. So again, these things might seem like silly hacks, but they're evolutionary. So you'll be messaging somebody without having to do anything, just in the way you're positioning your chest, right? So I would definitely encourage everybody, check her TED Talk out. It's a terrific example. Eye contact makes a big difference. Where you sit, I see a lot of times, I've had to do this many times too, where women come in a room, you're in a conference room, they'll have the main table, right? And then sometimes there'll be seats along the window, which are for, for the overflow staff. But I've seen sometimes people come into a room and automatically, actually literally not sit at the table. That signals I don't belong, right? So I think you got to give yourself the confidence and the permission to be no, I deserve a literal seat at the table. And I would say, I say this a lot too, because I think this was something that was a learning experience for me. Working with Puff, I was able to be in, just phenomenal room. So as we're all sitting around thinking through like, well, something has to be right with like, you know, this guy's worth $100 billion. He has something really different about him than me. You just kind of gotta think that to a certain degree. Yeah. And I gotta tell you, it's not, I don't believe it's that different. Going back to my nerdy science, like there was a project called the Human Genome Project.
Yeah.
I discovered that we all share 99.5% the same of genomes. If aliens came, we basically would be like different color ants to them. Like they fight with each other, they're all the same. Like, I mean, so like when you go into a room, you have to know that there is a stretch of like, you know, what you are today and what you can be. But it is 1,000% within your realm, and everybody in that room is with you in that same 0.5%. Yeah. Nobody is so superior to you that they are doing something that you couldn't be doing. And I think that, to me, bar anything else, is why I feel confident about like if people can do it, it can be done. Are they human? Then we can do it too.
I totally agree with that, and I like to use this example a lot for my SelfishBabes because. For me, okay, so we talk about quote unquote celebrities, right? And so for me, sometimes when I see people and they're like, oh my God, and this is no shade to any celebrity. It's like, no. Beyonce or whomever it is, you know, Meg Thee Stallion, whomever people like, it's like, oh my God, I'm in the presence of blah, blah, blah. I think that's nice to think, right? But I also think it's nice to think, well, I'm Beyonce too. That's right. Me, rather than it be this thing of hierarchy, right? I get being that's totally understandable, but sometimes it's to the point of like I gotta be back here, like I'm not worthy, you know. Sometimes I feel like like that. And to me, no, look at it like, wow, that's such a wonderful example of human capacity. Wow, they were so creative to
Precisely.
That this was done. Wow, it's possible for me. I love to use that affirmation. It's possible for me too. And so when I see that, for me, I think one of the best ways to show thanks for somebody to opening doors or just showing their creativity is for you to be the best you that you can be. Because it's for me, that is what's important. So I'm glad that you had talked about that and talked about even in the scientific way, our genomes and things like that. So people are understanding like, like we're not so different. Like I can do whatever I need to do that's going to help me grow and show me to my fullest potential, because everybody, you know, has their own thing. So I'm really happy that you have said that.
No, I couldn't agree more.
So now I want to talk into the good. Now I know that you have now moved over into the cannabis industry. Okay. Yes. I like to call cannabis Mama Cannabis. That's just Mama Cannabis. Okay. And I'm just like excited. Okay, so tell us about this transition and tell me why the cannabis industry?
Yeah, so we have been looking. Puff, as you can imagine, was getting so many opportunities to become a part of the industry for years while I was still working with Combs Enterprises. And then I just started seeing just, you know, friends on both sides being affected by it, right? People like, this place is making $20 million a year and we just opened. So you know what I mean? Like a year ago. And also on the flip side, people still locked up for doing the same things, depending upon what zip code they lived in or came from. Yeah. And after just studying the industry, I was like, you know what? This is an opportunity to be in something that, like, no bullshit, can actually change the world's economy.
Yeah.
I'll never forget going back to spirits, right? So think about when spirits was in prohibition. When we, in 2007, when Puff and I, we finished this deal with Diageo and we were out in Las Vegas, and the executives introduced us in this small room to all of the families who really own the distribution for liquor. Wow. And it's a very small group of families, and the room was probably worth $50 billion with less than 40 people in the room, right? You know what I mean? And there were people whose families had ties to post-prohibition. I never forgot that, as the people who took advantage of, like, spirits are legal again, and jumped on it, their great-great-great-great-great-grandkids are good for that today, right, from that decision. So as we started to see cannabis becoming legal, I'm like, well, I don't, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm starting backwards as a minority woman, right? There's no inheritance waiting for me of significance from 100 years ago. We gotta be the generation that changes it. And there's a chance to participate in this industry. I can't sit on the sidelines. Yeah. So that's the reason why I was excited. That's the first reason that was exciting to me. And then I also feel like, and I can do better here. This is the area where I'm trying to learn as much as I can and talk to people and see how we can better coalesce. It's maddening to think that it's still not. There are people still today in jail for carrying ounces. 2 ounces today in the United States. You know what I mean? And people are profiting billions. And this is projected on the high end pre-COVID, just the CBD side of the business, not even including the THC. And for people who don't know, you think about cannabis being made of THC, which you think of traditionally to relax or to get high sensation or celebrate, versus CBD, which does not have that piece of it, but it has the potential anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety effects. Just the CBD side is projected sometimes as high as $40 billion by 2025 in the United States. This is just, that's global. That's actually a global number. Yeah. Like, we got to be a part of that, right? Like, I'm almost like, well, this is the reparations I've been looking for. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that, for me, that was the thing that is exciting about it. And, you know, my husband makes fun of me. I mean, to this day, I use CBD. I've never smoked weed. Yeah. Or any kind of things on the THC side. Yeah. And actually, with COVID, maybe this is a good time for a test. But I tell you what, I saw. My mother has multiple sclerosis, and she's had it since I was like 9 years old. She has progressive. It's chronic. She's pretty much in like debilitating pain 24 hours a day. Yeah. And once medical marijuana became legal in the state of Maryland, she was able to start taking THC, and this has been like the first time she's been able to sleep through the night in like decades. So that honestly was a bit of the tipping point for me of being like, this is crazy. Like, I'm like, this is my mom, so of course I'm biased, but I was like, yo, can I do anything to help 5 more people to have a change their life like this? You know what I mean? So I was like, I gotta get into this. I gotta do it.
I love it. And what is your company's name?
So my company is called The Burn Group. And what we do is this kind of goes back to the story I just talked about, is we have actually partnered with some of the, the biggest distributors in the United States. So we're helping take brands right now in the US, it's just CBD. In Canada, we also have THC, and put them out and make it convenient. Quality brands that have credentials that we can curate in terms of making sure that they are great brands for the right consumer, and then put them out in convenient areas like grocery and drugstores. Instead of right now, it's actually not that easy if you're interested in it to go find it, and know that like you can Google CBD right now online and you'd be like, I want to try it, but I don't know who this brand is, where it comes from. The Burn Group kind of exists to fill that gap, and we're also working on rolling out a marketplace in Q3. Think like a Farfetch for CBD.
Okay, and so my question is, because I know we're all curious. My question is, okay, so let's say that you are interested in starting a CBD-based brand, and you can, have the marketing in the company. When would be the right time to come to the Burn Group? When would be the good time? Is it in the very beginning? Like, hey, I really want to have the CBD brand. How can you help me? Like, when can we come to you?
Yeah. So, end of the day, we're just ending our first year, right? But we have deep relationships. So I would say, it's not necessarily ever too early. You might have to be patient in terms of, I won't pretend like we have a lot going on, so I can't necessarily answer everything. Yeah. But I personally want to see any underserved population win, right? So if I can help in any way, whether it's like, well, I want to do it, but I don't know who to go to isolate. Okay, well, here's somebody that you can call to get the isolate. Or you're on the other side. I'm funded. I got a great brand. I got this, I think it's anti-inflammatory beauty cream. I'm ready to go, but now I need your help in getting it distributed. Then then you're perfect. Then you're absolutely ready. And at times 100% right to have that conversation. So, I'm definitely, my Instagram is just my name. So it's Dia Sims. Yeah. So me or some of my team should check it out on a regular basis. Please hit me with questions. This is something that's more than a job for me. I really want to see us be successful. So if I can help, I will.
Sure. I love that, because I know so many of us want to be in the cannabis industry. Okay.
Yeah.
and I say this from a holistic perspective as well, not just like as a joke, but the way that you talked about how cannabis or Mama Cannabis has helped your mom. be able to sleep through the night after years of not being able to do that. That shows the wonderful benefits that it can do in the medical system, right? For people, but on a holistic level when it comes to healing or dealing with pain and dealing with inflammation, different things like that. So for me, like, in terms of cannabis, like when it comes to herbs, like I'm really into herbs. And for me, or cannabis is an herb. She has her own energy. She has her own spirit. And what I like to do is I like to speak to the plant. So I have my little plant here. It's not the plant. So for me, I had did a podcast way back then, and I talked about, this is for people that do smoke marijuana. I talked about, you know, instead of just smoking marijuana, have you given it intention? And so what I say is that for me, the power of our words is very important. Our words are vibrating on a certain energetic level, depending on what it is that we're saying, as well as intention. And the herb as well has its own vibratory energy. And so for me, before smoking, are you speaking to the plant? Hey, my intention is, for example, my intention is, you know, Mama Cannabis, I would love to really be more into my body. I want to feel more. I want to be able to relax, to feel joy, and to feel happiness in these few moments. And that is my intention. You say it, you think it, you infuse the energy of your energy into the cannabis, and then, you know, you smoke it and you have your effects, because cannabis is a very feminine plant and very feminine energy. And I know that, so when I say I'm talking about a holistic point of view, that for me is like, even with CBD, I have CBD oil. I take it and I speak to it before I take it and ingest it, because I know the effects that it's going to give. But I also know that that plant, the energy of that plant has a certain energy, and I want to infuse my energy with the energy of that plant to gain certain effects. And so not even on a jokey level, but the shared benefits, the holistic benefits of cannabis is so healing. So I'm really happy that it's becoming a lot more legal in different states, affirming that it's going to become legal everywhere very, very soon. And definitely affirming to see more women of color in this industry, you know, in this, because like you said, you talked about reparations really quick, but honestly, this is a growing industry that we need to be a part of. And so, babes, out there, please.
No.
Being in the industry.
I mean, you said a lot of critical things in terms of, one, this is a plant, right? You know what I mean? This is whatever you believe in, this is a plant, right? So not that plants can't be dangerous, of course, but when you think about all the synthetic things that we allow to be in our bodies, the stigma around this plant is manufactured, just like many things we put in our body. And this is actually natural. And coming from, I mentioned briefly that I used to work in pharmaceutical sales, although they're two very different drugs. But it was always interesting to me to look at, like, there's a drug called Wellbutrin that people take for anti-anxiety and smoking and to help you stop smoking. Right? This was what it used to be used for. And it's like a dopamine antagonist, right? Ecstasy is an illegal drug, which people use, but it's also a dopamine. I mean, it's just like, who kind of has a better marketing plan, right? I mean, in terms of, I think cannabis is now getting the appropriate level of respect, because it's actually a pretty amazing drug. And then you just read the science of what it can do. I think it's incredibly important, the point you made. I don't think it, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's something I say a lot as well, in that I don't want to oversimplify this, but like, if in my brain right now, I tell myself, I'm going to get up and walk to my neighbor's house down the block. That's the direction I had given my brain.
Yeah.
It's the exact point you just made around the power of your thought and your words, that, right? Like, your feet will follow what your brain tells it to do.
Yes.
Right? So that's as big as this is what I'm looking for in my life, in my family, in my level of spirituality, in my interactions, in my success, right? So it is incredibly important that you program yourself and living things with what you want to achieve, because it is not that different than the roadmap you follow of being like, I have to go get on the bus. I have to go walk 5 blocks. Your body will follow that. So just, I think, being more audacious with the thoughts you fill in your brain, you actually train your body to fulfill it. And that's not a small thing. It's nothing hokey about it. It's real. So I couldn't agree with what you said more.
I say. And how old is your daughter, love?
She's 7.
And okay, so my final question is, what is one thing about self-love that you want your daughter to know?
I think it's just that, it's just it's kind of what I said in the beginning. It's how important her happiness is, and how important it is for her that it's okay to take care of herself. I think we have come from a history where women give such enormous sacrifice. And it is honestly the hallmark. It has historically been the hallmark of a woman.
Yeah.
How does she sacrifice with grace, right? Like she's so poised and graceful, and yet she's giving more than she should.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's right. I think we have to change that. Like, why is that the hallmark of a woman? That just seems like the greatest trick ever sold in. Yeah. And I want my daughter and, you know, all the young women to start to change that narrative, and that they don't have to be valued for their sacrifice.
Yes. I love that, which is why we have Selfish Babe, okay?
Yeah.
Authentically love themselves and also understand that they can, you know, co-create their reality. That's another also a very important point. But I think that story has been sold, and we, you know, a lot of people have ate it up, and now, you know, we're transitioning. And for me, when it comes to Selfish Babe or the word selfish, it's really just changing the energy around it, using it in a way that's more empowering versus a side eye that people give when you be like, oh, I'm selfish. Yeah. Side eye. You're like, no. Focusing on me, and guess what? When I focus on me, we'll be overflowing. I'll be able to give in a happier space. So you want to focus on myself. It's actually beneficial for humanity if women focus on
it's actually generous. It's actually generous if it's done right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much, Dia, for being on
this
podcast. Is there any last minute words that you want to say before we go?
I just the only thing that I would just add is that you know, it's an incredibly difficult time, and I think we're all putting pressure on ourselves as if it's found time. But the truth is, it's reasonable to have like crazy levels of anxiety right now, and to make sure that, like, if you come out of this whole and sane and happy, like, you have done well. Like, it is, and I keep, you know, anybody who's watching this, hearing it, you know, just sending you love and light, because these are challenging, unprecedented times that we're in, which makes it all the more important, you know, to wrap and hold yourself up and be selfish and ensure that you are loving yourself first in the midst of the madness that we're seeing.
I love that so much. Thank you, beautiful.
Thank you, beautiful.